Hello, today is July 23rd, 2016. My name is John Carlo Stefanuti. We are in Detroit, Michigan, and this interview is for the Detroit Historical Society's Detroit 67 Oral History Project. Thank you for sitting down with me today.
Glad to be here.
Can you first tell me your name?
Stanley Wegrzynowicz.
And where and when were you born, Stanley?
Born here in Detroit, April 10th, 1936.
Okay. So, as a child, where did you live?
Lower East Side of not the Lower East Side, but the East Side of Detroit.
Okay. What did your parents do?
My parents were independent meat market owners.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother, John, who's was 4 years younger than me. Unfortunately, he passed away about 20 years ago.
So what was your neighborhood like growing up? Was it racially integrated?
No. Neighborhood was basically all white children. I don't remember any ethnic spread within the neighborhood.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Catholic grammar schools. I'll mention the grammar school in Polish. It was named Zmartwychwstanie, which means resurrection. And that's between Mound Road and Conant off of Miller Road. So it wouldn't be that far from Dodge, Maine.
Was that school racially integrated?
No, it was basically the name of the parish was, we didn't talk English for 3 years.
Right.
So it was a Polish school, and I think everybody that went was Polish.
So what was it like growing up in your neighborhood and going to those schools?
I felt everything was normal.
Okay. So kind of moving towards the early 60s, could you sense any tension
Well, by
within the city?
the early 60s, I was out of college.
Mm-hmm.
There were very few. I don't think we had a black person in my high school. I went to De La Salle High School. And at the university, there weren't very many black students. It was an all-male university.
Where did you go to college?
Notre Dame University. And my first year, I befriended a very talented athlete, Aubrey Lewis. He was black. I ran track and cross country. He was a multi-sport star, but he ran track, just missed placing for the Olympics. And he was black. And the first day I met him, he was walking with a blanket to track practice. And I remember teasing him. I said, what are you carrying that blanket for? So I'm going to get a suntan. And I burst out laughing. I said, what the hell are you talking about? You're brown already. And he said, don't you realize black people sunburn? I said, no, I didn't. And so that was my first interesting racial interaction. Now, at my folks' neighborhood store, we had a few black families move in from the section of Detroit called Black Bottom. So we had 3 families. And then one interesting thing happened. A single black gentleman moved in who was they pulled up with a small van or truck, and he got out of a cab, and we could see from the store window that he was moving into an apartment just down the street. And he was black. And so about 7 women in the store who all spoke Polish, comment, oh, he looks elegant. Oh, he's so regal. I wonder what he does. Where's he from? And about an hour later, after his things are moved in the building, he walked with a cane, a blind cane, so he had partial vision. And he walked in the store, and I saw him coming, and our store had 5 steps up with no railing. So I was about 12 at the time. I ran out, helped him up the steps, introduced myself. He told me his name, which I don't remember anymore. And my mother came to the door and introduced herself, and he said, well, I just moved in the neighborhood. And Mother said, well, yes, we all saw you pull up. Everybody was excited. And he thanked her, and he said, could you have your son orientate me to things in a store? So I was walking him down through the different aisles, and all the women gathered by the meat counter. My mother was on one side of the meat counter, the women were there, and they're all talking about him in Polish. And as he and I turned to walk past him, he turned and greeted the women in perfect Polish. He spoke Polish better than I ever did. And he thanked them for all of the pleasant comments. And so I swear all these women must have peed in their pants. It was so surprising. And it turned out to be a great relationship. He had worked for the embassy in Warsaw. So he obviously knew he had to learn Polish, and he spoke it very well.
Wow. So with all that in mind, could you sense any kind of social tension
No,
within the 60s?
none whatsoever.
Okay. So then when, in July 1967, when, the riot started, how did you first hear about it?
Well, it was interesting because from the university, one of my friends went into the Air Force. And he had retired from the Air Force. He was one of the first air groups sent to Korea before we declared war on North Korea. And he was, what do they call them when they send them in? They don't call them official. They're training people and all this. And so he got his plane was almost knocked out of the sky. He landed with more holes in his plane than metal left, he said. And his term of duty was over, so he did resign and then started flying for American Airlines. And so he would be through the Detroit area quite a bit, and we stayed in touch. And when he got married, I went to his wedding, and he came to my wedding, that kind of thing. But he went into the Air National Guard, and the Air National Guard trained at the air base at Otsego, Michigan. I don't remember the name of it. So the first summer that they were going to do that, I was married and had my daughter says she was about 4 because I was asking her how old she was. And he invited us to vacation at a cottage in Alpena on a lake. Don't remember the name of the lake, where his whole squadron of pilots rented cottages. So that night, we sat around a bonfire and all that. Nobody paid attention to her. We didn't have TVs then out there. Nobody paid attention to her radio and all. We're just having a nice, relaxing time. These airmen from all over the country and their families. And he asked if I'd like to go to the air base in the morning to see what their routine is. So we got up quite early, 4:30 or for 5 o'clock to be out there. And he dressed in his normal training clothes, or flying clothes. And we got to the base, It was still dark. We walked into the gathering building for the pilots, and there were a few men already in there, and there was quite a bit of excitement. We didn't know what it was all about. And as we're walking down this one corridor, they had 2 strands of wire run and photos, like hundreds of them, about 8.5 by 11, they were duplicates, taken of the city of Detroit Friday. And the fire started on a Friday, the riot started on a Friday, if I'm correct.
They started on a Saturday, I believe.
Saturday. So did we get up there? I forget.
No worries.
Timing.
You saw
whatever. The first night we were not in the city when it started. So then the next day I go to this air base with them, and we see all of these pictures, and all the pilots and crews start coming in, and everybody's kind of excited about there's a riot going on in Detroit. Well, I never had a sense of a need for a riot because I'm still young. I didn't comprehend all of these issues, and never had encountered them, to tell you the truth. And so it was a real surprise to me. And as we're standing there talking about what's going on, all of a sudden we hear an abrupt attention yelled, and everybody snaps to attention. And there I was the only civilian, I think, there at the time. And as we stood in tension, we parted ways as 2 soldiers or airmen marched in front of, I forget what the man's rank was, colonel, general, commander. I don't know what his rank was, but he was a superior officer. He went up to the front of the room. They told us to face him, and he told them to stay at attention. And his immediate comment was, "Gentlemen, we are at war." And I was quite surprised, of course. He said, "There is a race riot going on in Detroit. We are now asking you to raise your right hand. You are being sworn back into the U.S. Air Force," because they were Air National Guardsmen from different states. And so with that, he told them, "This is serious. Be prepared for a war." And he leaves. He says, "Your commanders will take over." And so now it's a very serious mood. And they're issued each individual group was issued their orders. And my friend had to go flying, and they were a camera production crew, for photo reconnaissance. So I left, went back to the cottage, and explained what was going on. And those of us from Detroit were quite shocked, and of course everybody felt funny about it. And I think it was 2 days later we left for home. Of course, I was asked to go out to the base if I wanted to, saw more pictures. And when we left, I think it was a Monday morning. In Grayling, Michigan is where I think it's the Michigan National Guard trains. Hardly any cars on the road, early in the morning. And we were driving in a parade of military vehicles, trucks with, men sitting on the bench in the back with rifles in front of them, tanks on trailers, many jeeps with mounted machine guns, just a lot of various military equipment. And we drove with them because we were on the east side and they were going to the west side. And you basically had the same way and then split off at our expressways here. And so we drove into our neighborhood, and when we lived on a boulevard on the east side, Cadger and Chandler Park Drive, and I don't know what possessed me to get off near, there's a Chandler Park, and I decided to get off there and drive through the nice neighborhood, and at that park, the National Guard had set up a base with their tents and cooking things and all kinds. And we headed home, and there was absolutely no traffic. Just like the city kind of seemed like it shut down. We were asked to keep the lights down at night, that kind of thing. And so that was our experience, immediate experience. I was teaching in Catholic schools at the time, high school, and we didn't encounter much of anything because we didn't have we basically had a white community. And so, everybody speculated and talked about it, but that was pretty much it.
Wow. So you felt pretty safe with the National Guard next to you?
I've never felt threatened in the city. So with that going on, it was in an isolated area. And the same thing would have been at that time not to drive through that isolated area or go close. So for some reason, I never felt threatened. My wife did. But I myself told her, I don't think we have to worry. But because they did start, then the military would drive up and down our boulevard, so you always saw them maybe every 15 minutes. A jeep load of guys or with a machine gun would drive by. So, yeah, we felt quite safe.
After July of 1967, how did your perception of the city change at all?
No. I just felt it's a people problem. I personally didn't think of it as a racial problem because I never consciously experienced race. I had my folks, I don't think they ever talked about discriminatory things. They were unusual people. Generally, my dad was the most kindest guy you could know. And I never heard him say a bad thing about anybody. I don't care if it was a goofy customer or a neighbor, never once. So I kind of grew up in a home that didn't talk bigotry. So it was surprising to me to hear now this is being called racial. And I started becoming, because of that and all the publicity and all of the articles and newscasters, you're being brought into reality.
With all that in mind, a lot of people call what happens other terms apart from riot, like rebellion or uprising. With, all that you've learned now, would you call it one of these other terms? Or
I would call it this. People get angry for various reasons. If enough people are being made to feel the same way, then I feel they're going to rebel. And now, as history indicates, there were a lot of negative things being perpetrated against minorities. So the black people, obviously living in a predominantly white city, it was a problem. I think, as you see now, we even have police departments now that show bigotry, nowhere near as much as what we used to have. People have been working on correcting it, but any correction of attitude takes a long time. And so I feel it's much better than it was, and it's got a ways to go.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not that I can really think of.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
I appreciate being here.